Going public was super exciting. And I would say it was a little bit like mentally hard after that for a little bit, trying to process that. And that was exciting to get there. And then it was a little bit like, what now? I really like building things. I really do believe in hard work. And I believe that that's an important part of, achieving things and getting things done. And so I felt like it was really important for my boys to see that.
I'm Jake Aaron Villarreal, born and raised in Silicon Valley, here to take you behind the scenes to share what it's like to be a startup founder in an effort to make our lives better. I'm excited to have with us today Amar Goel, co-founder and CEO of Bito, which does AI code review. Amar, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jake. I'm excited to be here.
Well, thanks for jumping on. A little bit more about Amar. He is a serial entrepreneur who has previously founded PubMatic, which went public in 2020, and formerly worked at Microsoft, McKinsey, Harvard University. He's excited about using Gen AI to power the next generation of how software gets built. Amar, before we jump in here, where are you joining us from today?
I'm calling from the Bay Area, so I'm in Menlo Park, California, right next to Stanford.
When I started this podcast, I had this vision to go behind the scenes to share what it's like to be a startup founder in Silicon Valley, where I'm born and raised. And weekly, we dive deep in the trenches to find the wins, the losses, and the lessons learned, with the hopes that it helps you run a better startup. But here's the thing. If you've gotten any value out of these conversations or been inspired at all, hit the subscribe button. And I get it. Your podcast feed's probably overflowing. But to stay up to date what's going on in Silicon Valley, stick with us. Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to build something that matters. And we're better when we do it together. So hit that subscribe button and follow us wherever you find your podcasts. Now, let's get back to the show. I love that area. There's a lot going on today, transformation happening across the world. I happen to have worked at Oracle for a number of years, and I'm excited to
I
see
don't
what
know
the
if you
stock's
saw
doing
it
today.
today. Larry Ellison became the richest person in the world. Oracle stock went up
Which is,
40% or something, which is crazy.
yeah, it's like the one mistake I made when I worked for them, which was I kind of forgot to sell my stock. And, 20 years later, I'm kind of happy I did
Oh my God,
that.
good for you! Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So anyway, excited to be.
Yeah, I was actually born in the Bay Area. I was born in Mountain View in El Camino Hospital, and so I think in some ways it's kind of been in my blood a little bit to understand, think about technology and the startup ecosystem. I mean, I remember in college talking to one of my friends who grew up in Minnesota, and his dad worked at General Mills, and he said, "Well, I started a company in college that I was running after college, an e-commerce company." He was asking me about how I started, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I just kind of started or whatever." And then he was like, "Dude, you grew up in the valley, like it's in your blood, it's in the water. You drink it every day. Every day when you read the newspaper, the Mercury News, which used to be kind of the dominant newspaper in the Bay Area, was about this startup got funding, and look, tech was a lot smaller in the 80s and 90s for sure, but at the same point it was still what Silicon Valley, the Bay Area, was about. And so it just was kind of imbued the how you thought. Both my parents worked in technology. My dad was a semiconductor engineer. My mom worked in software companies and hardware and SAP. So it was just kind of, and I guess I was really interested and really excited and started doing programming in high school. Yeah, it was just part of the water.
Yeah. Well, we work with a lot of companies that are in Silicon Valley that are not born in Silicon Valley, which is the title of this podcast. You happen to be one of the lucky ones that, might have a different perspective. We saw the transformation of the internet in the 2000s, and we saw, AWS and cloud and the transformation of that, what that did for the industry, and then mobile. And now we've got AI, which is just incredible what it's doing and the pace it's moving. So you've got experience. You took a company public, which had to be an amazing experience.
Really was, yeah,
And
really was amazing.
when you do something like that, do you have the mindset of, I kind of built it, I achieved it, I got to the mountaintop, like it's time to keep.
Yeah, I mean, I think going public was super exciting, for PubMatic and the team and everyone, all the co-founders who had built it. And I would say it was a little bit like mentally hard after that for a little bit, trying to process that. And it was kind of this brass ring you're going after. And as you start a company, it's definitely an aspiration that you have. And so that was exciting to get there. And then it was a little bit like, what now? And so I spent some time really thinking about that. And I guess what I kind of came to the conclusion was that I thought I really like building things. I have a very bad long term memory. Maybe that's what lets me keep being an entrepreneur. But I still remember like looking at the first mock ups, for PubMatic, like printing those out. Actually, this is like pre Figma and all this stuff. So like,
Yeah.
looking at the mock-ups, the PDFs, and I wanted to print them out so I could make comments and all that. And it's like 2006. But yeah, so like I still remember that in my mind. So I really like building, and I really like getting product out there and seeing kind of people's reaction. It's not like always like the funnest experience in the sense that, it's not like when you launch a product everyone's like loves it. A lot of times there's a lot of problems and a lot of things to work through, but I just like that process of kind of building and innovating and creating new things. So that was kind of one thing. And then the second thing is like, I thought I really do believe in hard work, and I believe that that's an important part of, achieving things and getting things done. And so I felt like it was really important for my boys to see that, and just see them, like my kids see me working hard, and building and things, And so I think I wanted to show them that. I kind of felt like if I just check out and play golf or whatever, not that that's really checking out. You can actually do that seriously as well. But I didn't want to just be kind of like, oh yeah, I'm just like hanging out now. So I mean, there will be a point for that for sure. But I wanted to keep building, and I wanted.
Yeah. I've got 2 boys too, and I know exactly what you're talking about. They're coming in my office all the time, asking me, "What do you do and why
Yeah.
are you doing it?" And, they make me think about, like, my purpose and how am I helping the family and helping them. And, the other day we're out building a fence and, I was trying to teach my kids how to build. And as I was going through it, I started to think, what am I really doing here? I could just pay someone to come out and do this. And
Totally.
and I'm not super handy either. But what I thought about what I was really doing,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it was actually
Oh, that's
showing
nice. Yeah.
him you can have if you build this and you do it the right way. And they were complaining, but at the end we were all
Right.
pretty happy. And
Right. Yeah. It's
so
kind of the art of going through the process, and sometimes the outcome is not as important as like the.
exactly. So you went to Harvard, right? Congratulations, great
Yeah.
school. We've had a lot of people on our show from Harvard, and it's interesting what we've heard is and what we've learned is that I don't know what specific degree you got and where your focus was, but there's some courses that really are very purpose driven about helping the world, about inspiring, you know, careers where but you.
That's a good question. Critical thinking is probably a big part of help, how to take a problem, how to break it down, how to build an argument, right? How to really research, how to think through those problems, right? So I think that was one thing. I mean, most of your classes, I think the actual material that you learn, you do forget, 20
Yeah.
years later, right? I mean, I remember taking a course on sub-Saharan Africa. And I remember the professor saying the first day, and this is what I still remember. He said, if you learn nothing else from this class, remember that Africa is a continent, not a. And it's so true actually, because I think I grew up in U.S. in America, and I ended up
Mhm.
living overseas for a long time. That really changed my perspective about a lot of things. But growing up in the US, like I think it's very easy to just think of many parts of the world as very homogenous. And if you think about a lot of American companies, they have the US as a territory, geography, and then they say rest of world. Like rest of world is one thing, and Europe is not one thing, right? There's a lot of different cultures and ways of doing business, and that's totally different than a bunch of different countries in Asia and Africa. So anyway, so so you don't remember that much of the content. Getting it back to the point of your question, but I think like for I studied economics and computer science, but for computer science, I think a lot of those, because that ended up being a big part of my career, like that you do remember a lot of those concepts, right? And like how to build products, and how to how to think about scaling technology and whatnot. So I think that part was very applied for me. But I think like when I think about English and all that, it's more about that was probably applied to, like I said, learning how to write well and communicate well. But a lot of the rest of it, practicing those skills and at the time learning.
Makes sense. Well, let's fast forward to where you're at now. So AI is here. You've raised, 8+ million in seed. Is that
Yeah, about
accurate?
35. Yeah. Well, I think, it's been a journey for us too as AI has evolved and, kind of what we are focused on. We actually started, with some AI chat products, for developers back in 2022, right around when ChatGPT started. But where what we thought was happening was that as AI writes more and more code, a lot of the downstream processes like code review, like testing, like deployment, there are a lot of pressure is going to get put on these processes because developers are going to interact with agents that are going to write a lot of that code, and then or maybe all of that code, and then now they're still responsible for making sure that it goes live with quality. And so we started by building a code review agent, and really that code review agent is fundamentally built on a focus on really deeply understanding people's code and engineering teams understanding their kind of their code and their systems, so that then you can review their code well. And so what it does is it integrates into like GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, all the tools where engineers tend to kind of do their pull requests and review their code. And it tries to, analyze the changes they've made, analyze their code deeply, and then post feedback, and it's, try to be really spot on about like high signal, kind of low noise feedback. And now it's also available right in the IDE. So if developers want to get feedback as they're coding, they can do that, and in just a minute or two get a bunch of feedback before they even get when their code gets reviewed by a senior engineer. So anyways, that's kind of what we're focused on, and we're really going after and working with a lot of enterprises and seeing a lot of traction.
That's really cool. Yeah, you think about code and you think about code generators and you think about, engineers that today, they're using these tools to help them do their job better or faster. And but the code review around the quality isn't something that you think too deeply about on the front end or on the outside looking in.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we have believe is that the need for this solution is going up as developers are using AI to write more and more code. They're less and less familiar with the code that they're writing. If I mean, the sometimes the way I think about it is it used to be that if you asked a developer like, "Hey, I have a question about this feature that you shipped," and you could ask them any, and they know they wrote each line of code, so they know they can answer the question. Now they're like, let me check. Like I have to go check the code because I didn't write it. I scanned it maybe, and sometimes developers who I think are not doing a great job are like, I didn't even really scan it. I just kind of saw that AI outputted it, and I ran a basic test and it looked like it worked, so I'm good. And so now all of a sudden, like, we're hearing engineering teams say things like, well, when we have a bug in production, it takes us forever to figure it out now because nobody's actually that familiar with the code, right? So it's a little scary if you think about it. It's like you kind of have this code getting shipped into production and it's nobody really knows what the heck is going on. So anyway, so I think we see the need to like more and more deeply understand your code base as really an antidote to that, to really help be able to provide that important, detailed, specific feedback so are shipping high quality code. Because at the end of the day, any system at scale does need to work. It needs to work reliably. Technical debt is building up, where the bugs are, and nobody wants to be interacting with your favorite website or app or whatnot and have it crash.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it's similar to just not code, but just content. So, you can be a writer and you can have a lot of content created and it looks great. And, you're going to put this social media app in.
You're totally. I was actually just reading an article today about kind of like Sam Altman, I think, has been commenting on like, oh, there's a lot of the internet is becoming like AI fake. It feels like the AI generated fakeness. Reddit, a lot of fake threads and bots, and Twitter and or X or whatever, and then even just the internet. And some people were kind of saying that's the pot calling the kettle black a little bit. He's the one enabling all this, but maybe that was an aside, a kind of funny comment. But what people were kind of saying is like there's a lot of like low trust places that it doesn't matter the slop, AI slop that they kind of create. And so whatever, like you just said, there's all these mistakes. But if you are a high trust brand. If you are the New York Times or if you are Condé Nast Traveler, you may be using AI tools to help your writers write better, write faster, whatever. But people still expect and require that the end product you create is high quality, right? They're not willing to accept that, oh yeah, you just made a bunch of factual mistakes in this article. So I think it's the same for software products, right? If you go to Amazon.com, or if you are a company, Salesforce.com and a business user, you expect that product to work and work accurately and not have bugs. It's not like some one man show who just kind of vibe coded an app. So what we kind of like to say is like vibe coding does not equal vibe engineering. Like what you vibe coded app is a production ready app. And so we're trying to help
A
people.
lot about vibe coding and agents, proof of
Totally, and I
concept.
think that's great. It's a great first start, and it's certainly helping. I'm not trying to say vibe coding doesn't have its role; it absolutely does.
Yeah.
But like you said, that more at the prototyping stage. Hey, I want to show you how this idea works, or I want to get something out there in a basic form and see what people say about it. But then to take that,
Yeah. We're the business of hiring and helping companies hire engineers and product folks and sales go to market teams. There's some fears around AI and how it might replace the job, but we're seeing a lot of companies that are hiring, but they're only hiring if you actually have AI tool experience. How?
yeah, I mean, what we see happening and what I think is happening, and it's still really early days, right? And a lot of this depends on how fast the models are improved. That's kind of the underlying intelligence, right? We had storage, we had compute, now you have sort of intelligence as a service, right? And so like how much cheaper, faster does that get? But I think what we're seeing is like, critical thinking is still super important, right? Like communication skills are becoming more important, but not necessarily verbal communication, but written communication, right? That's how you communicate and that's how you get something out of AI, right? Is like, you got to break a problem down, you got to give it small and tokens, not tokens, but small components of what you want it to build. Like maybe you have a huge feature you're trying to build. It's like, okay, well, can I break this down into the 5 or 6 key things I need to do, and then maybe take one of those and break it down into a couple pieces, and then feed that to the model. And now I get back quickly what I need, right? And so now it all kind of works because I broke down the problem. But some engineers are doing a really great job with that. Other engineers are not. They're not thinking in that way. They haven't adopted those work practices. They're not great writers. They're not. So I think that's a skill that's really, kind of coming up. And in some ways, this is kind of the next level abstraction, right? If you think about 30, 40 years ago, as an engineer, maybe 40 years, 50 years ago, you had to, assembly language, right? Assembly language was what language, like, any programming language was compiled down to assembly, and then that was down to machine language. And so now you have assembly. And so people had to know assembly. Now nobody knows assembly. And now you have these higher level programming languages that don't require, you to know things like garbage collection, and, thread management. There's maybe a next level of abstraction, which is like, hey, maybe English is that programming language. But just like with a higher level language, you had to be able to clearly think about how to structure that, what classes you need, what modules, and then if you did that wrongly, you wouldn't scale. That's the same maybe in like how you communicate in English to the LLM to get the right program. So I think it's really just that next level of abstraction. And so I think it's both the communication skills and maybe just one other thing. I think you still need to understand how the underlying system works. So you can't be an engineer and be like, well, I don't really understand anything about scaling or, observability, or how I should think about debug, what a data structure does. I mean, because you do have to debug those things. You do have to think about trying to scale. I mean, just give you an extreme example. Google, sort of famous for like super fast search and doing it, really low level optimizations, like how the disks work to be able to make search super fast and super cost efficient. If you were just an engineer that sort of said, hey, told an LLM to build me a search, you wouldn't really understand all the super deep levels optimizations to make. So I think that those are still skills that are.
Yeah. There's a lot of complexity and a lot of innovation going on that everyone's trying to figure out and learn, and new pricing models for compute and training. A lot.
Yeah, I mean, we're really finding a lot of success with kind of mid-market enterprise type companies, right? So, I would say broadly 50 to 5, mostly they tend to be software companies or, services companies that are doing software. I mean, those are kind of like our you know customers, and so folks like that who are kind of leading edge, cutting edge customers, companies like Gainsight, Fetch, Whatfix, that these are companies that are really building great software but need high quality and really want to make sure that product that's shipping well done. But not we're not yet going really after super large companies, and we're not also really going after startups. True, I don't.
Yeah. Well, you had a company that went public, PubMatic. What are some of the key?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways, with AI, people say everything's changed, and I think the market is moving fast, and you know companies are going wide and trying to do lots of stuff. So I think that feels like it's changed a little bit. At the same time, I would say not a lot has changed, right? It still requires like going deep, I think doing things well, focusing in on a problem, and really how do you build a great quality, high quality product, and so you need a great team to do that. You need to have good processes about how you guys work, and how the team works together, how you communicate. So it's a little bit of like everything's changed and nothing's changed. I mean, probably, the AI speed of the model improvements and the number of models, I think that has been probably the biggest change. You know what I mean? Like that you're like every year you're seeing like meaningful changes in how sophisticated are the solutions and how sophisticated are the problems that you can solve, and I mean, we'll get into all the technicalities of the models, but just, they're getting better and faster. And so now you can do more and more stuff and just better, I was just, I think about our code review agent, the types of issues we're able to find and the way that we're able to explore and understand your code. It's just a step level improvement, today from a year ago, and some of that's the model and some of that's how we analyze your code, right? And so, I mean, I kind of like to say we probably added 50 points of IQ, to the agent, so somebody might have gone from 100 IQ to 150. I mean, you're talking about sort of average to genius level, in the last year in terms of what we can do in code review. Or, I was messing around with Gamma the other day. It's like this kind of presentation we use. And I remember I was using it in April to try, build some slides. And I was kind of like, okay, interesting. Like I was able to use a couple slides, but I had to make a lot of changes and all that. And then I was trying it again a couple days ago, and like the quality of the output and what it was able to do was like so dramatically different. Like literally, I gave it, I think, a 5 line kind of thing about what I wanted, and it outputted like tons of detail and all that. And so it's just maybe I gave it 10 lines of like detail and interesting and images and all that. So I was like, wow, that is like a step level change.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. With AI agents becoming so prevalent now, I was on this earnings call last night with Oracle just because I was wanting to see what was going to happen with the stock, knowing that it might go up like $20 today. And it went up so much more than that. I was like, firing off text messages and emails to my friends saying, "You guys, you got to jump on this at like 6:30 in the morning Pacific Standard Time because Oracle is going to like go up. It's probably going to go up maybe $20, and so get in now." It went up significantly more than that. But the reason I bring Oracle up was because we were looking at what do these big enterprise companies do that have tons of engineers and tons of developers, and they're building enterprise applications for the world, Oracle. But as a user, then you get these applications, and what do you do with them now? Like it's just software and apps and dashboards you log into and you put information in. But with AI, what they've done, what they're doing, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but they've basically created this AI studio. What it allows you to choose, within whatever workflows you have within your applications, let's call it CRM or marketing or finance, and then being able to choose the AI agents that they've already created, these templates, and you're just dragging this one. I want to use, for my back office, this AI agent, and this one for my front end office and or front office, and ultimately it's their being integrated and orchestrated without having to actually do the building. So they're like code generated apps or AI agents, and then you could make tweaks to it. But I was like, well, where is everything going to be heading if if you've got big enterprise apps that have the agents that are now being offered by the companies that have built the apps, and then yeah, you can do modifications to those, but Then if there's like potentially voice AI where you can just say, I want an agent that can do XYZ in my financial, financial app, and the agent will create the code, build the agent, and now you have agents building agents and optimizing how you operate the company. And now you don't need 20 people in, accounts payable. You have, or so like that's their vision of how they're seeing it. But that's like just one ecosystem of software. You've got multiple other applications and you have homegrown applications. And so there's opportunities for a lot of different areas to develop. But code review is, I think, a great.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way we kind of think about it is we want to help that code that you wrote with AI. How do we help that get into production, with really high quality and really, and if you think, jump ahead a little bit, like software development teams are going to be writing like thousands and thousands of lines of code per day per developer, a year or two from now, right? Because they're going to work with some agent, it's going to write a couple thousand lines in an hour. And now you have a job of like making sure this works properly and checking it out, seeing if it's all good. And so I think that is kind of how we think about things. But I think as software goes faster and faster, the average engineer will understand less and less about their code. And so they really need, they're more aware of that code base and more help that code base to help. So I think that's, what we are focused on is how do we help you ship quickly? Yeah. I mean, it's maybe like a boring answer, but it's just kind of keep going at it. Right. I mean, I think I'm really excited about some of the new capabilities we have coming out, and it's exciting time with AI. Lots going on, like you said, in the valley. Building a company, with a great team. So yeah, it's just kind of keep going at it and keep putting one step forward every day.
Very cool. Well, Amar, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, and for the listeners for spending your time with me. It means a lot. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, signing off for now. I can't wait to catch up with you all on the next episode. Until then, Amar, the world, take care. If you like what we're doing, don't forget to subscribe. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, and follow us on YouTube, where we go behind the scenes to learn what it takes to be a startup founder.